Every movie here was so humiliating that the studio picked up the phone, called the theaters, and said, "Stop. Take it off the screen. We don't want anyone else seeing this." One lasted 3 days. Another sold a single ticket in an entire city. These are box office flops Hollywood tried to erase. SNL had this character called Pat. The whole joke was you couldn't tell if Pat was a man or a woman, and that was it. That was the entire bit. Julia Sweeney played the character in sketches that ran maybe 3 minutes. Someone decided this should be a feature film. Sweeney herself didn't want to do it. She straight up said she didn't know how they could make it last 2 hours. 20th Century Fox passed on it, but they made it anyway with an $8 million budget. The film opened in 33 theaters in just 3 cities: Seattle, Spokane, and Houston. Opening weekend, it made $31,000. By the time it closed, the worldwide total was $60,000. $60,000 on an $8 million budget. Not surprised, though, who in their right mind would want to spend 2 hours watching some chubby, whiny, and obnoxious job hopper? Variety called it shockingly unfunny. One critic literally said, "I can't even dignify this film with a review." 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. It got pulled after opening weekend. 3 days and it was gone. This one's timing is almost too perfect to be real. FIFA, the soccer organization, decided to make a movie about itself. They funded 90% of the $25 million budget. Got Tim Roth to play FIFA president Sepp Blatter. Got Sam Neill, made this whole film about how great and noble FIFA was. The North American release date was June 5, 2015. Days earlier, the FBI arrested 14 FIFA officials for corruption, bribery, and money laundering. Sepp Blatter resigned. The entire organization was exposed as massively corrupt. And then the movie came out. Opening weekend, it made $918 from 10 theaters. One theater in Phoenix took in $9. That's one ticket. ESPN reported on it because the numbers were so historically bad. Critics called it pure cinematic excrement and one of the most unwatchable films in recent memory. Basically, FIFA had paid over $20 million to make propaganda about how honest they were and released it the exact week the FBI proved otherwise. Tim Roth, who played Blatter, never even watched the film. He later admitted he took the role to get out of a financial hole and apologized for it. Said his father would be turning in his grave. The director said he felt like people saw him as bad as the guy who brought AIDS to Africa. It lasted just 3 days in theaters. Then they pulled it. This one's different because it was actually making money. Silent Night cost around $1 million to make and pulled in $2.5 million at the box office. It was profitable, but it got pulled anyway, and the reason wasn't box office. It was angry parents. The movie's about a killer dressed as Santa Claus. The ads showed Santa breaking down a door with an axe, and the studio aired those ads during the day, during the afternoon, during prime time. They ran one during a nationally televised Green Bay Packers game. Kids saw Santa with an axe and lost it. Parents started calling in saying their children were now terrified of Santa Claus. A woman in Milwaukee named Kathleen Eberhardt literally created an advocacy group called Citizens Against Movie Madness. Other cities copied the protests. It became a whole thing. Theaters in New York, Wisconsin, and New Jersey pulled the film within days. Mickey Rooney publicly said the filmmakers should be run out of town. Then, 7 years later, he appeared in Silent Night 5, which is kind of amazing. By November 24th, TriStar pulled the film from wide release. 8 days and it was done. Delgo took almost 10 years to make. Started development in 1999, had a $40 million budget, was supposed to be this groundbreaking animated film. But other studios kept poaching their animation staff during production and slowing everything down. They'd hoped to release in 2003. By the time they actually finished in 2008, Pixar and DreamWorks had lapped them. The film looked dated before it even came out. They released it independently on over 2,000 screens but barely marketed it. Opening weekend, it made $511,000. That's about 2 viewers per screening. The timing didn't help either. Delgo opened mid-December between Bolton, Marley and Me, with Madagascar 2 still doing well. Nobody had any reason to see an animated film they'd never heard of that looked like it was made 5 years earlier. It got pulled after 1 week, lost $46 million. Fox looked at American Idol's success and decided to rush a musical into production starring the first 2 finalists, Kelly Clarkson and Justin Guarini. $12 million budget shot in 1 month. Kelly Clarkson knew it was going to be terrible. She said she read the script and knew it would be real bad, but she'd signed the contract when she won Idol and couldn't get out of it. She begged the creator of American Idol to let her out of doing the film. She actually cried, but they made her do it anyway. The film opened in 2,000 theaters and made $2.7 million opening weekend. Not great, but not a disaster yet. Then the second weekend it dropped 77%, made $625,000 and lost most of its theater count. It was pulled after 5 weeks with just under $5 million total. Time magazine called it a monstrous Idol movie musical and the worst film so far this century, and then Fox made it worse. They announced they were releasing it on VHS and DVD just 6 weeks after the theatrical opening. Theater chains threatened not to screen the film at all. Fox backed down, but the damage was done. Kelly Clarkson has never stopped talking about how much she hated that movie. Can't really blame her. Everything that could go wrong with Glitter went wrong, and most of it happened before anyone even saw the movie. The soundtrack dropped on September 11, 2001, same day as the attacks. The movie opened 10 days later on September 21st. Obviously, nobody was thinking about going to see a Mariah Carey musical drama. But the timing was just one problem. During the promotional tour, Mariah had a very public breakdown and got hospitalized. The studio had to push the release back 3 weeks, which killed whatever momentum they'd built and dropped the movie right into post-9/11 freeze. When Glitter finally opened, it made $2.4 million and debuted at number 11. That's already terrible for a $22 million movie. The second weekend, it dropped 61%. After theaters took their cut, Fox recovered about $2.3 million total. The movie had been in theaters for 2 weeks, and the studio just gave up and pulled it. The soundtrack bombed too, and Mariah's record label paid her $28 million just to terminate her contract. They paid more money to get rid of her than the movie made at the box office. October 23, 2015. Universal releases Jim and the Holograms in over 2,000 theaters. Opening weekend, it makes $1.4 million. That was the worst opening of 2015. 4th worst ever for a film in that many theaters. Worst ever for a major studio release. The problem started way before release. The movie was a live-action adaptation of an 80s cartoon, and the filmmakers changed basically everything about it. Fans hated it immediately. By the time the movie came out, the people who actually cared about Jim wanted nothing to do with it, and nobody else knew what it was. Second weekend, the movie averaged $160 per screen. Universal just stopped reporting box office numbers at that point. A box office analyst at Exhibitor Relations said he'd never seen anything like it. Not only the lowest debut for a studio film that year, but the worst of all time for any film released in over 2,000 theaters by a considerable margin. The movie made history as the first wide-release film ever pulled from theaters purely for underperforming. The one thing that saved Universal was that they'd only spent $5 million making it. Max Steel opened in over 2,000 theaters on October 14, 2016. Made $2.2 million, finished 11th for the weekend, dropped almost 70% the next week, got pulled after 2 weeks. This one was doomed before a single person bought a ticket. The movie had been stuck in development since 2009, based on a toy line that basically nobody remembered or cared about. By the time it came out, there was no reason for it to exist. The studio couldn't get it a PG rating. It was stuck at PG-13 even though they were targeting families, and when they appealed, they lost. Then they released it without showing it to critics first. It opened the same weekend as The Accountant and a Kevin Hart special. The competition destroyed it. On Rotten Tomatoes, it got a 0% rating. This one's different because the movie itself wasn't actually terrible. It was weird and not for everyone, but it wasn't glitter. The failure here was entirely about marketing. Fox spent massive money promoting it. They bought a Super Bowl ad that cost at least $5 million, but then in the week before release, they ran a fake news viral campaign. They created fake websites publishing controversial stuff about Trump, vaccines, and stuff like that. It all was supposed to go viral and get people talking about the movie. Some actual news outlets picked up the fake stories, thinking they were real. When people found out it was a marketing stunt, they lost it. Fox had to apologize publicly, but the damage was done. The movie opened to $4.2 million. Second weekend, it made $1.4 million, and then Fox pulled it from 97% of its theaters. That's the largest percentage drop ever recorded for a wide release. All in, A Cure for Wellness lost an estimated $66 million. 15 days in theaters. The fake news disaster killed it. The director was Gore Verbinski, who'd already burned Fox with The Lone Ranger a few years earlier. After this, his relationship with big studio filmmaking was basically over. January 31, 2020, Paramount releases The Rhythm section in over 3,000 theaters. Opening weekend, it makes $2.8 million. That's the worst opening weekend ever for a film playing in over 3,000 theaters. Worse than anything else in that category in history. The problem started years before release. The financing collapsed mid-development when the production company changed ownership. The script was never fixed. Paramount and the producers couldn't agree on what kind of movie it was supposed to be. Paramount wanted a Bond-style action movie. The producers wanted a slow European character thriller. When they finally screened it for test audiences at the end of 2018, it allegedly got some of the worst test scores the studio had ever seen. Paramount slashed the marketing budget, delayed the release twice, and didn't even bring it to CinemaCon, which is basically the studio telling exhibitors they've given up. They dumped it during Super Bowl weekend and just let it die. Third weekend, The Rhythm section grossed $25 grand total. Then it got pulled. The movie needed to make around $100 million worldwide to break even. It made $6 million total. Paramount took an estimated $40 million loss. There was a German tax law back in the 2000s that let investors write off 100% of their movie investments. Which sounds complicated, but basically it meant you could make a film with free money. Zero incentive to make anything good. Uwe Boll figured this out and started cranking out terrible video game adaptations. Alone in the Dark was one of them. $20 million budget, and Boll structured the deal so that Lionsgate would just collect a distribution fee while Boll's company covered all the actual costs. The movie opened in January 2005, made $2.8 million opening weekend, 12th place nationally. For a wide release, that's humiliating. Second weekend, it dropped 69%. By week 3, Lionsgate and the theaters just gave up and pulled it completely. Final domestic gross was $5 million. Worldwide, it scraped together about $10 million total. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 1% score. The guy who wrote the original script publicly disowned it before it even came out. But obviously, Boll didn't care. The German tax loophole meant he'd already made his money back on paper through the write-offs. Ben Affleck directed, wrote, produced, and starred in this period gangster film about Prohibition-era Boston. Warner Brothers gave him $65 million to make it, then spent another $45 million on marketing. Total investment over $100 million. They kept moving the release date around trying to find the right spot. Originally October 2016, then January 2017, then they moved it back to Christmas for a tiny limited release in 4 theaters to qualify for the Oscars. That limited run made $185,000 over 3 weeks. Not great, but it was only 4 theaters. The real test was the wide release in January. It opened in 2,800 theaters, made $5 million, placed 11th. Second weekend dropped 66%, and then week 3, Warner did something that made film industry news. They pulled it from 94% of its theaters in a single week. At the time, that was the biggest single-week theater drop in history. Final gross was $22 million total against $110 million investment. Warner executives estimated they lost $75 million on it. Michael Mann decided to make a cybercrime thriller starring Chris Hemsworth as a hacker. Legendary Pictures gave him $70 million. They spent over $20 million just on TV ads before release. Total marketing probably cost another $35 million on top of the production budget. The problem was the release date. January 2015, same weekend American Sniper went wide, and American Sniper did super well. It set the record for biggest January opening ever with $105 million. Blackhat opened in over 2,500 theaters and made $3.9 million. Second weekend dropped 57%. Universal looked at the numbers and pulled it from all but 200 theaters going into week 3. Legendary Pictures officially wrote down $90 million in losses on the film. That $90 million loss was part of Legendary losing over $500 million total in 2015. That same year, a Chinese company bought them for $3.5 billion. Guy Ritchie and Madonna got married, and for some reason they decided to remake some obscure Italian film from the 70s. Ritchie would direct, Madonna would star. Budget was $10 million. Before the movie even came out, the tabloids had already turned it into a joke. Sony held test screenings, and they went so badly that the studio seriously considered skipping theaters and just dumping it straight to video. They ended up giving it a token theatrical release in under 200 theaters. Opening weekend, it made $354,000. That's about $1,800 per screen. Second weekend dropped 79%. They pulled it after week 3. Worldwide total was about $1 million against a $10 million budget. Sony sent it straight to video in the UK without even trying a theatrical release there. The damage to Madonna's film career was so severe that she vowed never to act in a theatrical movie again. And she's pretty much kept that promise. A producer named Ken Weiselman had worked on Teletubbies, so he thought he understood children's entertainment. He created some puppet characters called the Oogieloves and decided to launch them directly into theaters with a feature film. He financed the entire thing himself. $20 million for production, $40 million for marketing, $60 million total, all his own money. The marketing strategy was just stupid. Weiselman believed kids don't plan movie trips weeks in advance, so he launched his massive TV ad campaign just 1 week before the film opened. Parents and kids had basically no time to even hear about it, let alone build any anticipation. Labor Day weekend 2012, the movie opened in 2,100 theaters, made $443 grand. That became the lowest opening weekend in history for any film playing at over 2,000 locations. And the characters themselves were called disturbing and creepy rather than charming. Critics said the movie was nauseating and possibly harmful for children. By week 2, theaters cut it from almost everywhere. After 3 weeks, it was completely gone. Weiselman lost $59 million. The film recovered less than 2 cents on every dollar he spent. One of the worst returns on investment in cinema history. He told The Wrap afterwards that it was never about box office and said that the notoriety might lead to future installments. It didn't. That was the last movie he ever produced.